Hi everyone, I'm Ian. When it comes to the lifespan of a console, you think most are 5 to 8 years, but oh boy are there some outliers. So why not take a look back at a few of the longest lifespans for consoles.
Starting off with the best-selling consoles of all time, it's the PlayStation 2, running from 2000 to 2013, well into the PS3's life. And it's the best-selling and longest-running console for a very good reason. The PS2 couldn't only play PS2 games, it could also play PS1 games, and it could play DVDs and CDs, making it the only console in the 6th generation that could play DVDs. And at a price of $299, it made sense to pick that up even if you only wanted it for a DVD player. And it has over 4,000 games worldwide, so there was really no end to games that you could play. Up next is the Game Boy, another legendary console. Released in 1989, the Game Boy is another one of the best-selling consoles ever. And this lifespan only includes the original DMG Game Boy, none of the revisions. So this little barf green screen lasted 14 years, but it makes sense. Sure, the screen sucks, but it lasts 30 hours on 4 AA batteries, and it only costed $89 when it released, and it came bundled with Tetris. And it wasn't just a console for kids, it was great for adults too, with games like Final Fantasy Adventure. Although the Game Boy had a very odd reason to stay alive, I think that it's well deserved. Next, we have not only one of the longest running consoles, but also one of the best selling. It's the Nintendo Wii, running for a whole 14 years. The Wii was such a beloved console, and for a good reason. Anybody could pick up a controller and play. The controls were so simple, many of them imitating real-life actions, and it was the cheapest console of the 7th generation. And it had another leg up from the consoles in that generation. It could play all GameCube games. The Xbox 360 could only play some original Xbox games. The PS3 could play a varying selection from the last gen library, though backwards compatibility was something that only the original Wii could do. The Family Edition and Mini models couldn't, as they removed GameCube controller ports. Nevertheless, the Wii had huge games all through its life, and so I think the Wii had a well-deserved long life. The next console is one that had a very hard time while it was out, the Atari 2600. After being the biggest console in the 2nd generation, the Atari 2600 was on track to being huge, but then the video game crash of 1983 happened. Due to so much shovelware being released and game packaging that was deceptive or just didn't have any information on it, people started returning their recently purchased 2600s in games, and it wasn't looking good for Atari. And yet, the 2600 continued being manufactured, from 1977 all the way up to 1992, 15 total years. 9 years past the video game crash. It survived 2 successors and continued to sell through the NES's life and into the SNES's life. Speaking of the NES, how about the NES? The console that saved a dying medium. Video game. The NES made a point of not being called a toy, which is why it's called the Nintendo Entertainment System. It planned on not being a fad and becoming something that people would pick up more than just once or twice. And it started the Super Mario and Legend of Zelda franchises, which, in case you didn't know, are still going to this day. The NES survived all the way up until 2003, past the death of the N64 and into the GameCube's life. The final and longest running console of all time is actually one that you wouldn't expect. The Sega Master System. The Master System wasn't all that popular here in the US, but that's mainly because the NES was. But everywhere else in the world, oh, it was huge. Japan, the UK, Europe, but the country, the whole reason that it lasted as long as it has, that kept it alive, is Brazil. There is a good reason for this. Import taxes on electronics in Brazil are insanely high. So, how do you combat this? By making the console in Brazil. There are Master Systems being produced to this day, a whole 35 years after it was released in Brazil. That towers in comparison to everything else in this list, almost double the NES.
It's surprising to see what consoles lasted the longest, even if they weren't the best-selling of their generation. But they all have to come to an end. And I'm going to guess that the Master System's life is going to end, tomorrow. Well, there's an apocalypse, but the Master System is still being produced.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing, hit subscribe. And if you have any recommendations for videos to make, leave it in the comments.